but it's not crazy for me. I don't know if any of the audience members or
Right. I think what I might do is when I'm not speaking, I'll put myself on mute. And anyway, Monique, you are going to do the speaking, most of it anyway.
there you go. I'm happy
Yes.
to kind of answer all questions. So I'm ready when you're ready.
All questions about event production, my goodness. Um, so we'll give folks a minute or so, but oh, that's good. That's good. Thanks for letting me know that, Meena. Not the stream is live on social media, so that's good as well. Um, so this is our last unconventional career series episode with my very dear friend, mentor, former colleague. What more can I say? I don't have enough words for Monique, but um, I think it's one of the most unconventional careers that I have come across. Monique might say something completely different, but just to give you a background, Monique, and then maybe introducing you a bit more. Um, from the part of the world I come from, unless you are a doctor or an engineer, um, people don't think you are very good. And while growing up, I think that's been one of our biggest challenges, that how do we as creatives, as um, more creative professionals make a mark on the world? Because, like, obviously if the world was just made of doctors and engineers, the world wouldn't have gotten very far. um, so actually, when I joined Money 2020 3.5 or so years back, and I went to our first ever Money 2020 conference. Before that, I had been to a lot of these conferences, shows, events, but behind the scenes, what I saw Monique pull together, and Monique was our event director at Money 2020 in Vegas that time. And what I saw behind the scenes sort of opened my eyes up to, like, this is live physical event management. And I think, I don't know, probably would be super, super overwhelming for doctors or engineers to do, but requires so much tenacity, so much intricacy, so much thought before that. I just had
Resilience,
to,
so much resilience
so
too.
much resilience. Oh my goodness. Yes. And that is why I wanted to get Monique on and talk to all of you folks about event production as a career. And Monique has spent over 2 decades doing this. And she now produces conferences for none other than TED. My goodness. And can I tell you, Monique, to tell us a bit more about your journey? Where did you start and how did you find this industry?
Yeah, and just to kick it off, this industry is multi-billion dollar industry. So let's start there. So I know when parents are thinking about doctors and lawyers and stuff like that, they're thinking about financial security and how can someone have financial security within their career? Well, be an engineer, be a doctor, be a lawyer. And because this is a multi-billion dollar industry, there is financial security being part of this world. And so for me, when I was coming up in this industry, you fell into it. It wasn't something that you went to school and say, I want to run corporate conferences for a living. Like, nobody said that. You kind of was doing something else that ended up with you managing some type of event for your company. And then it always fell on you to now start managing that part of the event. Or you were working in media where they always do events. They do more entertainment or B2C, be business to consumer type stuff. And so events has always been a part of that strategy because it's a way for them to engage. And so for me, when I was in school, I went 100% just to do marketing. I didn't know what I wanted to do in marketing. I have an outgoing personality. I love coming up with new ideas. I love being creative. And I just thought marketing was the way for me to kind of do all of that. And so when it was time to pick internships, I picked an internship at this small boutique media agency that does events, and was in there asking people to buy a table for $25,000 to come to this event for whatever fundraiser we were trying to put on. And seeing the intricacies and all of the details and everything that you have to do. You know, one of the things I love to say is my mother still probably to this day don't understand what I do. People think events is just making things look pretty, making things look fun, doing some giving out badges, putting some food together and doing signage. And there's so much more that goes on behind the scenes to make an event successful. And so me being in college and seeing like, oh my God, one of the core things is I like to be outgoing. I'm a detail-oriented person. I love to be creative and come up with different ideas. Like, wow, this can be my sweet spot. Let me do this. And then I never left the industry. So I've done events in those boutique entertainment events. I've done publishing for different magazines, hosting their and coordinating their events. I've done associations, so direct marketing association, so very large events for that. I've worked for Ringling Brothers and Disney on Ice, doing their events for that, doing medical events, doing meeting planning, and then coming and winding up with Money 2020, which is running one of the largest fintech events in the USA, and then landing at TED. So in each one of those steps was more responsibility, more money, and just bigger brands and great opportunities. So I would have never stayed in something if I wasn't being pushed every time to even be bigger and better and different, creative, and really kind of get my creative juices going, because every event can and does usually look different. You have to think about different ways to help people connect, different ways for people to engage. You want to make sure, you know, they have a good experience with even the mundane stuff like food, because if they don't like the food, that can bring your whole NPS down. Like, there's just a lot of things that people don't realize that it takes to make sure that every step of that attendee's way within that event has to be stellar and top notch. And how do you make sure someone is thinking about all of that?
Yeah, that's so intricate. Like, I'm glad you mentioned the food, because we obviously know something happened with food once upon a time. Um, but other than food and printing badges, Monique, you mentioned that there are these intricate details that need to be thought about. And someone asked in the chat that are events bigger than before after the pandemic? And I just wanted you maybe to speak a bit about what are the other things that go into planning of an event. For example, we planned out Money 2020 Vegas in Europe last year for almost 1.5 years.
Yeah.
And people don't realize how much planning, how much thought go into it. But what are some of these things that you would need to work on a daily basis from one thing to the other?
Yes, and I also see a really good question about the finances of events. So I'm going to wrap all of that into my answer. So number one, absolutely, events are bigger than ever because everyone lost connection. We are human beings who like to connect with each other, who thrive off of the energy and vibes of each other. And so being just behind a screen, you don't get that level anymore. And so people are just dying to now get out and understand and realize, like, I need that human connection and I need to start doing that. And events is just another way for people to kind of have that. What people aren't going to do anymore is they're not going to go to as many events as they used to. So people are very careful about their time now because they're really trying to balance their wellness, their self-care and business, and not just flying all over the world all the time and things like that. So instead of them going to 10 events, they're going to pick 3 to 4 really good, impactful ones that's going to make a difference for them. And then they're going to go to those. So you should always think about, how are you going to be one of those 3 or 4 that people are really going to hold tight to, because they're getting everything they need out of coming to your event. But what goes into putting on an event? So what happens now that we just had our big TED conference, is our flagship conference in Vancouver. We have to now do a review of every single component that went into the event. We have to do a review of what happened on those stages from a thought leadership perspective. How was registration? How was our health and safety and our COVID testing? We have to think about our gifting program. We have to think about all the dinners, activities, and workshops that we did on site and off site. We have to think about the pre-conference stuff that we put together. So how do we create these synergies with our audiences even before they get on site? How do you let a first timer know about what their experience is about to be? And how do you stay in touch with the first timer to get them excited about coming to the event? We have to think about furniture, how much furniture that we have, the storing. We have to think about build. How many stages are we going to build? How many exhibit spaces we're going to have? We have to worry about sponsorship. We have to think about how many partners do we have? How many partners do we need for the next year? And how do we start facilitating that? We are a not-for-profit, so we have a philanthropy arm, a lot of donors and patrons. This conference helps to fund a lot of the stuff that we do for TED out of the year. So there's a whole strategy around philanthropy now that we have to think about, and what does that look like? Are we going to add in more events on-site and off-site? What does that look like? How do we work with the city? So we have to worry about policing and security for high profile events. We have to worry about what's happening around the city that we need to be concerned about. We have to work with our VCC on community building. So the VCC is the Vancouver Convention Center. So that's where we host our event. How do we take what we're doing and still facilitate stuff within the community, so the community thinks we're not just there just to extract stuff, but we want to give back to the community in certain ways? And then you have to think about the finances. So all of that stuff that I just talked about costs money. It costs money for travel. It costs money for transportation. It costs money to build stages. It costs money to build exhibits, food, security, temps, staffing, lodging, all of that stuff takes money. And so now you have to put a big old P&L together, line by line, about what you spent this year. Did you spend higher than you did in the previous years? Do you have to add inflation to what that is for the next years? Is there things we need to take away? Are we spending too much? Are we spending too little in certain areas? So we go line by line in our P&L. And then I have a whole production arm. So the tech of an event, the video cameras, the microphones, the testing of stuff, the videos, the presentations, that's a whole production department that costs a lot of money to maintain and do. But you will always have to worry about that stuff that's happening. And then you have the whole marketing. How do I get people to know that this event is taking place? How do I get the right people in the room? So there's a whole marketing strategy. There's digital marketing. There's in-person marketing. There's pop-up events we have to do. So there's a lot of stuff, hopefully. I'm tired of talking. That's how much stuff you have to think about when you are putting on a conference.
And we haven't even mentioned data or digital, Monique, sorry. I mean, honestly, when we were looking at how do we connect people more using new age technology within that event, making a big show feel smaller, all of those things that you need to think about, and the fact that how do you know if certain spaces have too many people and certain spaces become ghost towns, and how do you move people around the show floor, and all of that sort of requires that much of thought. And so many times folks ask me, but Sudeshna, what does data have to do with events? And I'm like, oh my goodness, you have no idea how complex a beast events are. And I think it's fascinating. It's an industry that I would have perhaps never thought about, but the more I've gotten to know it, the more I've started, like it's hospitality, but on steroids, I think, if there's something like that. Monique, for someone who wants to get into some sort of an events organization wants to follow a path like yours, what do you think they should be doing at their early career stage?
So before you even think about events, you have to think about self. You have to understand what skill sets you feel like you want to be passionate about and or you're strong in. I don't think you should force yourself to say, "Oh, I'm just going to try events," and you are not a detail-oriented person. You have a string of perfectionism that runs through you, because that is the death of being an event. There is no such thing as perfect. There are so many things happening behind the scenes that sometimes is completely falling apart that the audience or the attendee does not even know. And all you have to do is get through that moment, try to fix it the best you can, and move on. And if you are a perfectionist, that will drive you crazy. That will produce a whole different level of anxiety for you that I don't think would be great. So you have to be resilient to kind of be into this and know that you have the core of resilience that sits within you. You have to enjoy putting on something from beginning to end and then starting all over again. This is not something, you kick off your planning, then you do everything you need to do for it. You come to the event, you get this high that happens because things worked out, or everybody enjoyed it, or you hit all your KPIs and your milestones and stuff like that, and then it all gets torn down. Like everything gets torn down, everything is gone, it's over. The memories are great, but then people are on to the next, and you have to be ready and willing to just start all of that hard work all over again and get to doing that. So first, understand self. And if you harbor that, I'm in it to win it. I love to see finished products. I don't mind starting all over. I have resilience. I'm detail oriented, and that's how you should kind of get into it. Next part of your journey is try to do different jobs within events. So I know when you go in, the recruiters love to put people in boxes. They were like, if you are a marketer, stay a marketer forever, because then you become a master of marketing. And if you are in operations, then that's your sweet spot. And for me, that was not my journey into leadership. It was, I wanted to find out what I liked, and I didn't know what I didn't know. So I wanted to try the different aspects. So I did marketing. I've done operations and logistics. I was a meeting planner. I was a content person, which became my sweet spot for me, putting content together for conferences. But I did a whole host. I was a promotion person. I did a whole host of stuff within events before I landed on that. And I think we need to give ourselves time to figure it out, instead of just saying, nope, I'm a marketer. Nope, I'm a salesperson. That's it. That's all I'm going to be doing, or whatever, when you're kind of starting out in this career, because you don't know, like I said, what you don't know. After I found my niche and my joy in content programming, and everything else became a value for me when it was time for me to start looking at leadership positions, because I was like, I know what a marketer goes through. I know all the tools and tactics they need to use. I know what an operations person is always looking for and some of the challenges. I know what happens with a salesperson and sponsorship and how you're supposed to do that. All of that helped shape me to be a more empathetic and understanding leader when it came to leading an entire events department. So I needed and felt that it was such a big, wonderful opportunity for me to have all of that background experience before I even stepped into leadership positions.
That's amazing.
You are.
I'm back. Yeah. So I was saying that that's amazing, and yes, I agree. Recruiters will try put you in boxes, but if you like the industry, and more often than not, leadership comes when you have a broad understanding of many roles as opposed to being a specialist in one. So love that. Um, shall we take a few questions that
Yeah.
have come in? Naveen says, "How did both of you connect?" I'll tell the funnier story. I'll take that one, Monique.
Okay.
So Monique and me used to work at Money 2020 together, and in person, I met Monique during our Vegas event. And for the longest time, I wanted to really tell Monique, oh, I really love your energy. Can we chat more? And it took me about 1.5 years to come up to her and say, oh, Monique, it'll be really nice to do some fortnightly catch-ups. And since then, we've been doing fortnightly catch-ups. So that's how we met. So for those of you who are wanting to maybe find a mentor or coach, that's something that I get asked a lot. Just feel free to ask the person, because all this while in my head I was like, Monique is too senior and I love her energy, but what will she think of me and all of that. And actually she's so relatable, so down to earth, that it was my energy blocking me off rather than hers. So yeah, that's a bit of a, I don't know, funny or not, but a bit of a tangential story. But a lot of them about TED.
I would think so.
Yes, of course, as you would expect. um so uh on a lighter note, do you cringe at some of the TEDx talks?
No, I don't cringe at the TEDx talk because the TEDx is a licensed program from TED. So it is an offshoot of TED. You have to apply to get a license to host a TEDx event, and you have to hit certain criteria in hosting that TEDx event. So anyone can kind of go online and apply for a license if a license is available in your area and region. It is not for profit, so you can't make a profit off of that TEDx event. So my thing is, I have different resources being with TED Corporate and running the flagship programs than a TEDx organizer might have. And it doesn't mean that the experience isn't a great experience, whether you go to TEDx or you come to TED, because in the end, we want to share ideas that create impact. And so they're hitting our particular criteria because they have to in order to keep and maintain that license. And so if they are doing what the core thing for us to do is share ideas and create impact within that region or community, then they're doing what they're supposed to do. So no, I do not cringe at it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I think a lot of us outside TED often think that TEDx and TED are the same, but what you're saying is it's actually very different. It's just a license that you get. And what I do really find fascinating is that even within TEDx events, there are sometimes talks that have been organized, and you put them on your YouTube channel,
Yep. Yep.
even if they did not maybe abide by certain guidelines that TED has, and it'll be clearly mentioned that it doesn't follow the protocol and the guideline. And that's really interesting. But in spite of that, they are still ideas that make an impact.
Still ideas that make an impact. And that's in the end, right? You when someone is doing this as a volunteer, let's be clear, as a volunteer, on their own to do it, they're putting all of their blood, sweat, and tears into this. They're doing their best. And so that's all that we can pretty much ask, as in, I have different resources than they do. And sometimes they have to grow into being better, right? Sometimes it's their first one, and then by the fifth one, it looks completely different than their first one and stuff like that. So we have a licensing program because we feel TED should be global. People should have an opportunity on a global scale to participate in TED events, and the TEDx experience was the way that we thought could make that happen.
Yeah, I think even from a
You
marketing, sorry, even from a marketing bit, I think that's a brilliant idea, because with TEDx, TED's name as well gets spread out into communities. And the fact that we don't know that TED and TEDx are different in itself is a very good marketing strategy if you think about it, isn't it?
It is a great marketing strategy. It is how we have worldwide recognition. If it wasn't for that and being able, between that and YouTube, Like those
Yeah.
are the reasons why we are global. So it is absolutely fantastic that we were able to launch that, and so many people have taken to it and volunteered to do stuff for it.
Yeah. Um, Great. So now coming to your personal favorite TED talk that gave you goosebumps. Do you have one on the top of your head, Monique?
Yes, I do. So the one that I always talk about is Teach Girls Bravery, Not Perfection by Reshma Sujani. And I don't know if I'm saying her name wrong, so I apologize for that. But what I love about it is that the message is about not deferring your dreams due to your battle with perfectionism. And I think a lot of women always go into things thinking you have to be perfect, and they won't apply for jobs because they think they have to be perfect, and they won't raise their hand for projects because they think, oh, I don't have all of those, the wish lists of things. I'm not perfect in that area. And so, what I really liked about that talk was we teach boys bravery and we teach girls perfectionism. And we really need to be teaching women and girls that it's okay, that risks are an important part of life. It builds character, it builds resilience, as well. It's a great a way to learn how to do something different or be better at something. So that particular talk is my favorite.
I love that. And I think my brain is just going there. One of my favorite TED Talks is this talk by Amy Cuddy, where she says, fake it till you become it.
There you
And
go.
and I think that's phenomenal as well. And one of the TED Talks that I think changed my belief about how confident people can be. I can't hack confidence. So I talk a lot about all of that stuff. And the reason my brain sort of went towards that was because it's so interesting that I think in your body's biochemistry, like the testosterone automatically will give you the risk taking ability and bravery. So um, girls in a way need to be taught what boys almost intrinsically have within them in some
Yeah.
respect. So love that. Now the big question, Monique, how do you decide on speakers?
Okay, so what I do at TED is I manage the full conference experience. I manage what we do from a virtual digital component, and I help to manage some of our smaller global events that happen within our theater. We have a theater within our office, and what happens outside of that. I do not manage the curation team. So I have no say or anything that goes into the speakers that go onto the stage. That is actually managed by a wonderful team, but also the head of TED, the one that purchased TED, oh, what, 20 something years ago, he continues to lead that part of the business. So for I can give you some background on what I know, but I don't know all of the intricacies on why they choose the speakers that they choose because that doesn't live in my wheelhouse. But what I do know is they're always looking for human storytelling. So really infusing a humanity, a human side to discovery, impact, all of that good stuff. It is about builders now. So before it was about just sharing really cool ideas. Now it's that, and how do you create impact and change, whether it's within a community, whether it's with a injustice, general justice, what have you. So those are some of the things. There is a link on our website where anyone can submit to have a TED Talk. But you have to be really clear and concise. You really have to think about what is it that's different, unique, stand out, that you are going to be bringing to those stages that deserve a TED Talk. Not everything deserves a TED Talk. It doesn't mean that everything shouldn't be covered in some way, listed some way. But a TED Talk is really about storytelling and really being good about putting and weaving all of these pieces together in 18 minutes. So you really have to think about that if you have the ability to kind of do that and you're bringing something unique to the table.
Right. Um, right. So the next question from Vivan, how long does it take to market the conference?
We're marketing now for next year for 2023. So we just had our conference last week. So we it depends, digital versus a live event experience. So you would take 12 to 6 months to market a larger conference that might have multi-thousands of people. If it's something smaller, it might be in that 6-month range that you do marketing. And when it's digital, nobody pays attention to a digital event with 6 months worth of marketing. It's usually closer. So that's usually around a 90-day marketing mark that you start doing that.
Brilliant. Is TED focused on going more online?
Well, with the pandemic, most of our events had to go virtual. And now I don't know if people know that we have something called TED membership. So TED membership is where you can give as little as $5 a month to become a TED member, and you get access to these very cool online events with some of the speakers that come off our stages. And they're, where you can ask questions and really engage with these people. So those are all virtual events that happen through TED membership. We are absolutely looking at the metaverse and seeing how events are being hosted in the metaverse and how we can start doing that as well. And using VR, AI, and all that kind of stuff, because we need to think about what does TED 2.0 look like for us. And people are going to be starting to live more and more of their lives online. So you have to be putting something together that addresses that. So that's definitely in the works for us. But yes, we have a very strong virtual component. I have an event coming up under our TED Women brand. We have a women-focused gender equity empowerment program that we do. And so that's usually in person. It's going to be virtual this year in October, and then it goes back to in person next year in 2023. So that's going to be another huge virtual opportunity for people around the world to engage in a TED program.
Right. Awesome. Marketing advice. So, Monique, for anyone who's starting out a marketing career like you did back in the day, what's your advice? And maybe worth talking about it from an events marketeer perspective as opposed to everything else, just because I feel like that's where your experience will be very, very relevant.
When I came up with marketing, it was very different than what it is now. So I want to talk about it from this perspective now. Understand data, understand how to use data for target marketing campaigns. Absolutely think about digital marketing skills, understanding what it takes to do SEO, build websites, do campaigns that are PPC, paid campaigns that you do that can live all over the internet. There's so many things, so many tactics and tools that I did not have to deal with, that I had to learn even being going through my different employment opportunities that I did not have when I first started out. Marketing was advertising. Marketing was getting stuff on a billboard. Marketing was sending nothing but emails and all of this kind of stuff. Now marketing lives everywhere. Marketing could be in media. Marketing can be in podcasts and television ads. Marketing can be just where people are doing their everyday life online. Marketing can be in Facebook and social platforms. It's so many places. So I think digital marketing, really understanding the crux of that and what goes into that, and then understanding how to pull data, what data excellence looks like, and how to make sure you are capturing the right data for your marketing campaigns.
Yeah, love it. I think marketing, when I think of marketing, and I'm not a marketeer by profession, and when I think of marketing, the only two things that I think of are data and I would like to say maybe data again, but copy perhaps, but then data again. um and yeah, like this is what, when people ask me what do I do, I'm like, yeah, I'm always, almost, I think 80% of my time I spend working with marketing teams. So yes, data is definitely becoming more and more relevant to that career. Monique, Rumesh asks, how hard is it to organize a TED event? And maybe what I'll just add on as a side note to that is, you have already described to us the intricacies of running something like a Money 2020. Um, how has that been different to organizing something like TED, which is slightly different?
What's good about TED is it really, impact is just as important as revenue. And I think with Money 2020, it was, how do we hit certain KPIs from a revenue perspective, from a brand perspective as well, making sure our brand lives and breathes 24/7 and it stand out within the fintech community. With TED, it's a little bit different because it is a not-for-profit. Our programs are basically donor programs. So even if you bought a ticket to Money 2020, to TED in the USA, a majority of your ticket price is a tax write-off. It is a donation to TED as a not-for-profit. And so what we do is, it's not about us making a lot of money. It's about us making sure we're creating this really good impact within the world and showcasing people, places, and things that can really make this world better. So that's very different than Money 2020. And it's very different about how you plan to bring community together to do that. So with Money 2020, it was just list your ticket price. Anybody can buy a ticket to come. With TED, you have to apply. You have to be accepted because you fit the community that we're trying to build here. And so that means there's a whole different type of target marketing that goes into that. There's a whole different type of outreach. It's really trying to find those people that make sense instead of just blanketly letting people be in there. Then you have such interesting people. I mean, oh my God, everyone I talked to, they were so like, they didn't even know they were interesting. It was just so interesting. How do you facilitate those type of serendipitous as well as planned connections? So people constantly get fed, their curiosity is fed by these very interesting people through these dinner experiences, through these workshops, through these activities, through our app, through our tech. How do people don't understand that we've created certain things for you to bump into certain people and they think they're just doing this randomly or whatever. Like all of that is a different thought process probably than what we had before. Then you got your standard stuff that you do at every event. You think about food, you think about signage, you think about hotels, booking, venues, all of that stuff. So there's just some standard stuff, but there is definitely some unique stuff that goes into putting on a TED flagship event.
Wow, yeah, like the amount of thought that needs to go behind who gets to meet Elon Musk, I'm sure is like, yeah, I mean that's too much pressure at some point, I think. But Monique, Priyanka asks, if they are planning to host a TEDx event in their college, what advice would you have for them?
Download as many and view as many TEDx stuff that lives on the TED.com website and that lives on the TED channel on YouTube to really kind of understand what a strong TED program is from a curation standpoint. Your curation is the heartbeat of a TEDx event. So making sure you're discovering some really good thought leadership. So really understand what is the key things that stands out and what TED, the corporate parent company, is kind of putting on that you can kind of make sure that you implement. And then think about engagement. Like, how do you help people to connect with each other, to figure out stuff together, to workshop stuff together? How can you kind of create those opportunities within your TEDx program for people to do that? People want to feel passionate about something. So what can you kind of put together that will bring out that passion in people, and them being proud that they got to participate in something like that? So I would take it from that standpoint.
Amazing. So the next question we have, Monique, you mentioned a bit about this. How do you see the future global landscape with the advent of metaverse?
I think a lot of events are going to live on both. I think you're going to have a lot of you're going to have in-person events, you're going to have virtual events, you're going to have Web3 events, you're going to have all of that stuff. Like that one brand is going to live on various platforms because people will be living on various platforms. And then you got to think about it this way. When you have to go to an in-person event, there is some significant costs that come without outside of just buying the ticket. You got to find your hotel, you got to get your flight, you got to get your transportation to and from, you got to eat. There's a whole lot of stuff. And so what happens with these virtual platforms that they give more opportunity for people to engage with the TED brand. And so that's one of the things that you have to have that, especially since we consider ourselves global. We have to be able to facilitate a global connection, and not everybody can always fly into an in-person experience. So we have to make sure that virtual experience is just as sharp as the in-person experience, but it will be different, right? Because we still need to hold a specialness that happens when people get together in person, but it can still be great if it's virtual.
Amazing. So does that therefore mean that you will have more offline events as well? Like, how do you foresee the interplay between online metaverse and offline events? Does that mean you'll have more of offline events? Does that mean you'll have more curation within the offline events? Or how do you think
Both,
that will
a
play out?
mix. It's a mix. So we're looking at events for in different ways, in different formats. Not everything is going to feel like the TED flagship event. It can't. This is a very highly curated, not even just from the speakers that are on the stage, but from the audience members. That takes a lot of time and effort. You can't keep repeating that in every single event. You won't be able to have an expansion of different events if you have it at that same level. So there's going to be some events that are highly curated in that same way. Some events where you can just buy a ticket to. Some events where it is all about maximizing engagement in the virtual world. Some events is get to virtual and come to in person. Here's this 2 for type deal, 2 for 1 type thing. Like it's going to be different formats that we're looking at. That's my job of why I was hired, was growth, and looking at how we can continue to elevate and grow the TED brand with the conferences and event experiences that we do. How do we create impact, making sure those events are experiences that create some type of change or inspiration for change in the world? And also, how do we become more global and making sure that there's so many other people that can engage with the TED brand in a different way?
Okay. And if Rajat wants to attend a TED Talk in the future, is like what does a in-person TED conference look like? And I think this is something that we always wonder about, like, is it just about the stages and people sitting around the stage and the talk, or what does it feel like inside the conference?
It's a whole other world outside of what you see on YouTube, like, and what you see from the talks. You only get such a small snippet of what a TED conference is by what you see on YouTube. It is an experience that happens outside of that stage door. So you have hosted dinners. Like I said, you have where we host dinners for every single person that's coming to this, and they get to have these very intimate experiences with different people. I hosted a dinner on the pursuit of wonder with a magician. Okay. And we had, after each course, we would have some questions about how do you see wonder and how you open up your mind to wonder and things like that. And then each of the tables, and I had 200 attendees to my dinner. That was just one dinner out of like a dozen dinners that we were holding that same night, where people can participate in different topics and different things. And people met so many wonderful people they would have never bumped into if they didn't go to one of those dinner experiences. We have activities where we had flown in this Mexican chocolatier to come in to teach people how to make chocolate together using beans, and how people were just engaged and just excited and learned something they never learned before. I call TED conference the playground for the curious. If you are a curious person who is just open to just wonder and awe and inspiration and thinking differently and things like that, then TED, the flagship conference, is the place you want to be in. We have places where I had pretty much some type of arts and crafts where people were working and building stuff. What does the sphere of possibilities look like in a new world, and build something that kind of meets into that? Like, there were just so many different ways that people were busy at the event outside of just listening to the content. And then we built a badminton court, and we gave badminton classes to people in there. So there was just these fun activities that we had race car driving with actual NASCAR tech that they utilize for race car. So many different things that happen off that stage. And it's basically, you just got to apply. You got to apply. We have people from all backgrounds, people from all various countries, various ages. I have people who've been coming to TED for 20 years. I have people who are first timers who are in their 20s just coming to TED, getting access to it. So it's pretty much, as long as you kind of present and answer those questions that we have in those applications to the best of your ability, and you're able to come and pay that ticket price, then you are going to have a life-changing experience.
Oh my goodness. One day I'll be there. This is what I'm working towards. It'll now go on to my vision board. Yep. Attend the TED conference. That's going on the vision board now. I'm sure some of the folks there are also thinking the same. Monique, I don't know whether your biggest audience base is India or not, but how do you go about even measuring the audience of TED? Because for me, TED is like YouTube, but obviously TED is not only YouTube. TED is so much bigger. So can you give me a bit of how do you even go about measuring that? And then where do you think most of your audience is?
When you say how do you go about measuring the impact of TED, or what? I'm trying to make sure I answer it correctly.
I think about audience, like people you would consider as TED audience as opposed to impact, because impact in some ways I think is harder to know, right? Like you wouldn't necessarily know that, this TED talk here changed my life, and then I have started talking about it to like 10 other people, using my own method and added my own spice into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I guess what I mean by audience is perhaps impressions, perhaps where your email lists, social media, anything else.
So we look at TED in a couple of ways. We look at TED through our impressions and engagement through our media platforms. So we have TED.com, where we host a lot of our videos. We have YouTube channels. We have TikTok now, TikTok channels that's really blown up for us. And that is how we kind of measure engagement. We have TED membership. So how many people are engaging with our TED membership? We have caps on our attendance for some of our events, because like I said, some of them are highly curated, and you can't do curation for 10,000. You can do curation for 1,000 or two, but you cannot do curation for 10,000 in the same way. And so, making sure that we are kind of selling out from that particular standpoint. Partnerships is important. So partnerships and sponsors is important. How many of those are we getting that are participating in various platforms for us, not just with our conferences? We have TV shows and things like that we are working on. So we have TED Institute, which is our business arm, where we do TED at Work. We can create mini TED events for companies. So that happens. TED does over 20 different types of things to service the community in some way. So it's the sharing of the ideas through the thought leadership. It's the TED experience where you get to meet people that you probably would have never met without coming to TED. And then people offshooting from that and doing stuff together from those types of meetings. You have climate change initiatives that we fund. We have something called the Audacious Project, where we find funders to fund programs that are going to change the world for the better and positive. We've raised over close to $1 billion for other companies who are part of that Audacious Project, who are changing the world in some way. So TED does a lot of different things, and we make sure that those engagements for those different things are either consistent or they're growing.
Awesome. And do you think that there's any specific part of the world that has more TED presence than others, or is it pretty much like across the world you have the same sort of presence?
Across the world, TEDx is very popular internationally. So a lot of people have TEDx license for all over the world. That's where you see a lot more of the international presence. But to the TED flagship conference, you absolutely see people from all over the world. I have people from all over the continent of the US, Africa, Asia, everywhere from around. They come there because they are so inspired. There's a spark that happens when people see certain talks. And then they're like, I want to feel more of that. And so I want to feel that in person. So they figure out to come and do that in person. I know someone had asked, is there going to be a flagship event in India? Not right now. We aren't planning for that, but we are planning to put flagship events in other places other than the USA and Canada.
Great. On marketing strategies for online events, any advice for Vivan to grow the brand? Just for context, Monique, Vivan is one of the founders of Creator, and they are looking to obviously grow the Creator brand as well. So any advice?
Yeah. So how are you driving the traffic to your event? You have to think about it in several different ways. And some of it is paid and having a budget for that, and some of it is not. And it is basically what we tended to do is the free model of the TEDx stuff, right? And so what's the free model that can be attractive to a global community that you can do? And then it's also lists. Where are you finding the people? Like sometimes you have to purchase data and really start building a comprehensive database. It doesn't all come to you organically. So sometimes you have to put investment into getting data that makes sense for your target marketing. Where are things living on? How are you streaming things to different platforms? How are you creating something that gives someone something to do? So if you're saying, yeah, join Creator for this, is there a follow-up to say, now become a subscriber, now become this? Like, what's the action that happens that you are consistently thinking of whenever you do any type of marketing? How are you creating engagement with your brand with every piece of marketing? But you don't want to overwhelm people all the time, right? So you have to be doing this across the board in different areas. You have to look at it as what's the paid model of marketing that we need to start doing more? What's the organic aspect? And how are we using our partners and our hosts or whatever to help from a marketing standpoint, which is a free model, or if you have to pay a little bit there. So putting them in buckets like that and really kind of getting your list of things that you need to be doing under each of those buckets are going to be helpful.
Yeah, and the fact that I think you are based out of India makes this a lot easier than if you were based out of Europe, for example. A lot of these buying lists and all of that stuff is much simpler when you do it in a non-GDPR environment. So
Yeah.
that's definitely one of the things I'd say. And I feel like those are the questions we had. We had a lot of questions. I mean,
We did.
I did not get to ask you any. Right. Um, Monique, any last words of wisdom for folks who want to be on TEDx stages, want to attend a TEDx event? Well, probably not TEDx event, but a TED event. You sort of mentioned that, but yeah, actually, why don't we talk a bit about being a speaker on the TEDx stages, because that seems to be more of a attainable dream for some people rather than at the TED conference itself. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, figure out who's holding a license within your city. And so that's basically a Google search of when did these has there ever been a TEDx Bangladesh or whatever, or something like that? Like, what are, we had TEDx Vancouver, we have TEDx Monterey. Like, people take cities and do something, TEDx Harlem, that they do. So really first finding out where there is TEDx stuff in your region. If it's not, do you want to be the person to kind of start doing and putting that together from a volunteer standpoint? Next up is honing your storytelling skills. Not everyone is great communicators. They think they are, but not everyone is. It is truly something you have to practice. It is something you truly have to. I hope people know that those people that you see on TED stages from our flagship conference go through months of training. It is not just you saying you put a speech together. We say, okay, that sounds great. See you at TED. No, there's a whole training aspect to how to piece your story together, how to be clear and concise, how to make sure you put human elements into your story, whatever. Months and months, more than a month, months and months of training for that speaker before they even go onto that stage. You need to be thinking about that too. How are you as a communicator? Are you a strong communicator? Are you strong at storytelling? Do you have a beginning, a middle, and end to what you're trying to say? How are you putting a heart and soul to connect with your audience into what you're trying to say? Those are the things that make a really great TED Talk. One of our most popular ones is Brene Brown, who talks about vulnerability. She started on a TEDx stage. We found her from a TEDx stage in a TEDx experience. She did not automatically come onto the TED stage. And so because of her brilliance on weaving story and being a storyteller, once we put her on our platform, she completely blew up. Book deals, television deals, all of that kind of good stuff because of her experience with TED. And so you can't just say, I'm going to show up and talk about something. You have to really figure out how to be an effective communicator, and then how you put that down on paper so that we can see that you're an effective communicator when you're sending in that application to speak.
Yeah, and also I think one of the things that we tend to miss when we think about, oh, we want to get that speaking gig, is about like, what is the impact that you are trying to create in the world as well.
Yeah,
So yeah, you get onto the stage and talk for 18 minutes, but so what will happen
exactly.
as a result of that? And is and however, I don't know, however cliche it seems, that people can see your purpose through. Like, it's not like energy just comes off. If you are there for a purpose, you'll get people will feel it. So yeah,
Exactly.
on that, I think this has been brilliant. Thank you so much, Monique.
This has
um
been fun.
yeah, and I don't know if any of you have more questions, but I feel like we blocked in an hour and we are almost at the end of it. So um, if you have further questions, obviously feel free to ping us on LinkedIn. Monique is on LinkedIn as well, but before you send a LinkedIn invite, it probably is more sensible if you give your question, give a background rather than just send an invite just so that people know the context. But this has been such a pleasure as always, Monique. I got to speak to you twice this week. That hasn't happened many times, and so grateful for you. And thanks to all of you folks for joining in. And apologies for my weird camera today because of whatever it is. But yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. And I know, and everyone who tuned in hopefully got something out of this conversation and think about events and event production in a very different way, and how it is a viable career that you can be very successful, you can still make great money, and you can still do great impact with it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, anytime your parents say doctors or engineers, you can be like, I want to be like Monique. So, yeah, there you go.
All righty. Thank you so
Brilliant.
much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.